love using it. I actually come to work each day thinking, right, what am I going to do in Zuplo today? Which is a bit geeky, but there you go.
In this video, we interview the founder of iTicket, who's a Zuplo customer who typically uses Azure for everything, but opted to use Zuplo, the programmable serverless edge API gateway. You'll learn more about why in this short video. Enjoy. Hey Reece, thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us your favorite programming language.
I am the founder and managing director of iTicket. So we're a New Zealand-based Kiwi ticketing company. I started the company back in 2004. So we've been going 19 years now, although it still feels almost like we're a startup in the way we operate, but we're far from it these days. So we'll be turning 20 next year, which is a bit of a milestone for us. So my background is as a developer, but these days I like sort of designing solutions and solving real-world problems in the events industry from a ticketing perspective and how people attend events with their tickets and all the technology that comes from that. And favorite programming language, not necessarily my favorite, but if I go back to my early days, it's ASP Classic, so VB Script, which is pretty old school. But these days we're moving the platform with through to Node.js and JavaScript and TypeScript, so much more modern than what I was used to.
Fond memories, visual interdev, baby.
Fond memories.
I remember it well. I wrote a lot of code in it, and then VB.com components. And anyway, we are definitely dating ourselves here. Cool. Actually, tell us just a little bit more about iTicket. Like, how should people think about what you do as a business?
So we're a ticketing company. So we sell tickets on behalf of event promoters around the country. So we sort of are part of the puzzle of punters buying a ticket and attending an event. But ultimately, we're a technology company. At our roots, what we do is heavily based on the tech that we develop, but that shouldn't be seen by the end user as such. It should just be a seamless, slick experience where everything just works. Nothing's breaking. APIs just work. Websites just work. So we're sort of a combo tech company and event ticketing company. But we work with all sorts of promoters all over the country, from theatre and performing arts to sports to expos to comic con type style events. So a bit of everything. It's a very interesting day in the life of at iTicket.
It's cool. And if people haven't guessed by the accent, you're based in New Zealand, right?
I'm in New Zealand, yep. So based in Auckland, and we work all over the country here.
Awesome. So on the other side of the world from me, pretty much. So you mentioned APIs. Thank you for that segue. Obviously, that's what I want to talk about with you today. And, again, not to bury the lead, you are a Zuplo customer and have been working with us for a little while now. And as I understand it, you're primarily an Azure shop. You run on Microsoft Azure. And you were originally using Azure API Management as your API gateway of choice. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So for a number of years now, as we've been constantly evolving and upgrading our platform, Azure API Management, specifically keeping within the Azure world, was the tool for us. So just trying to keep everything as simple as possible. And as a service, it works really well, but it didn't quite do everything that I wanted. So it almost did most things, but it was always the remaining 10% that became really difficult and almost made it not usable for how we needed to use it. We've got a relatively small dev team. We've only got about 5 developers. So, we're the little engine that could at the end of the day. So we rely heavily on services and tools that do as much heavy lifting for us as possible. So API management in Azure was good, but there were complexities with it that made it more difficult than it needed to be. So hence doing a bit of research and then happening upon Zuplo a little while back.
Well, I'm glad you did. And before we get into those differences, that made you switch to Zuplo, I'd love to know, why did you even adopt a gateway? Like, what was some of the challenges you were facing as a business that adopting an API management platform was going to help with?
One of the key challenges for us as a ticketing company, and you can imagine with the likes of big on sales of events, popular events in particular, going on sale, there's huge demand all of a sudden at a particular time. So 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, a big event goes on sale. Rate limiting was one of the primary reasons for us to use an API gateway or some sort of tool in front of our backend API that would protect the service, so we don't need that crashing. So the gateway itself needed to have much higher scale than our backend service, and being able to rate limit and having our application deal with those rate limited responses was the way to go. The other angle was using a queue, which is also common in the events industry for ticketing websites, but we wanted to try and steer clear of people sitting in a queue and just govern the access to our backend API instead using rate limiting. So that was the primary reason, going back to the beginning of using Azure API Management, was because it had rate limiting built in. Although we discovered over time it wasn't a proper distributed rate limit. So we ended up with some challenges there as well.
Well, that seems like a good point to get into it then. So what do you mean by it wasn't a distributed rate limiting capability?
So the service itself was scalable in terms of it would auto scale. So the instances would ramp up from 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 20, 30, 40, no problem. But the rate limit we'd specified would also be multiplied by the number of instances, which is the opposite of what you need. At a time where you want rate limiting. You want a hard number of no more than X requests per however many seconds. And we discovered that service, as it scaled up, the limit increased as well, which is what we didn't want. So Zuplo works the proper way, in which the limit we specify applies.
Yeah, okay. So it sounds like the implementation of Azure API Management, not that I would have any inside knowledge of this, is sort of probably an in-memory counter or a per-machine counter. And so as you add new nodes, it's simply just a multiplier. And so it's only able to rate limit. Whereas Zuplo is a fully distributed rate limit with a global counter distributed. We have distribution around 270 data centers in the world, which I think is probably another thing you like, right? Because we actually have, we're actually deployed to data centers in Auckland. I think there's at least two in New Zealand, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you're probably in Sydney or similar with Azure. I don't know where the nearest place is.
It was in Sydney. Yeah, so Azure, Sydney, Australia East data center there. So latency is not too bad, but Auckland's even better. So it's only sub 5 milliseconds with Zuplo. So really, really quick.
Yeah, especially when you're using caching
all of New Zealand. Yeah. So with both rate limiting, caching, anything that's coming out of the box of Zuplo is really quick. But the cool thing is we don't have to worry about any of that. We don't have to think about where is the data center, where is the distributed limit set. We just set it and it's done. We can forget about it and we can trust that it will do its job.
Awesome. So I think there's a couple of other things I'd like to pick your brains on that you've mentioned to me you've enjoyed about your experience on Zuplo. And I think let's start about talking about multi-environment you mentioned to me. So this is something you talked about the working copy experience that we offer, and then your ability to push through stages. Tell us a little bit more about your experience on Zuplo, how it differs from API management, and what you like about it.
So with API management and Azure, the environment scenario was very complicated. You only had technically one environment that you were working in, and it wasn't pulling from GitHub or any sort of source control. So you were working directly within API management there. To then go between environments was a very complicated, convoluted process, one that we didn't actually end up working out ourselves. So that was one of the sort of the clinches of going, there's got to be something that does a better job than this. So again, coming across Zuplo, the working copy, on my local laptop, just working the browser suits me fine. Then being able to just push to a branch and then merge it in, and it's deployed within like seconds. There's no waiting around. There's no big lengthy times we have to wait for anything to happen. When we're working with a small dev team, we're literally sitting around the table from each other. If something's been missed, update working copy, push, merge, deploy. You could be through and done in that in 20 seconds, which is phenomenal. So we just go from working copy to a dev branch through to stage and then through to production, and we can just push that through really, really quickly. And all of the good things that go with that as well, with being able to roll back if we got something wrong. And then obviously environment variables to be talking to different databases and different backends with all of that. Set it up once, it's done. Yeah, you're just working on good application logic rather than figuring out all of the pipe work.
That's awesome. And a popular reason why people like Zuplo, most people have mentioned this. And I think you have quite a few projects on Zuplo, like 10 projects, with different custom domains. You mentioned you found that quite easy to do as well.
Yeah, that's been really good. So rather than just having one API, one massive API that's maybe broken down by routes into sort of sub APIs, we've decided to use separate projects with separate GitHub repos for each one of those. So we sort of treat them independently, so one can't break the other in that respect, but they are all tied together under one API domain. So api.iticket.io / whatever the project happens to be. So that's what you guys have connected up for us. So we can deploy essentially parts of an API independent of everything else around it. So that gives us some comfort that a deployment of one project has no bearing on anything else, yet it's all under one domain, which is really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that's working out for you. One of our favorite topics, I think, because Zuplo is very opinionated about this, is the programmability of the platform. And one of the things we didn't want to do when we designed the system was build some kind of new DSL, like domain-specific language that you would write in XML or JSON. If you need to do something custom, you just drop into code and it's super easy. And I know you folks have, written a reasonable amount of code in Zuplo. You've got a couple of custom policies and other things. Like, tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so that works really well. I'm not generally on the tools on a daily basis. I leave that to our dev team to do the heavy lifting internally. But I really like being able to accomplish things myself. It gives me a sense of purpose in my day to spit out a bit of code that's not ASP Classic. So a bit of JavaScript and TypeScript in there, but really good tooling within Zuplo to be able to jump in, and lots of hints and things that give you a bit of a guide on how you should be doing things, but really powerful. You can, especially with working copy, try something, save it, try it. Doesn't quite work, try it again, make a change, save it. We're talking seconds between these changes. So custom code policies, really, really powerful. But really like also just having the built-in policies that, 80% of the time do what you need anyway without having to write any code. And I really love that. So low code is a big plus for me. Not necessarily what hardcore devs want, but you've got the best of both worlds. So you can have a combo of a whole range of policies that you guys have got built in. You can just choose from and just sort of layer it up and get what you want. Or if it doesn't quite do what you need, then you can just jump into a custom policy, easy as.
Awesome. Yeah, I've enjoyed working on with you some of that stuff. And then the other thing I think was interesting to you folks was when we moved to be natively powered by OpenAPI. I remember you sending me some feedback about your experience and how that impacted your workflow. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I have to say that was a great decision on your part. Love working with OpenAPI. So originally we were, creating routes directly in Zuplo, with path parameters and all that sort of thing. We've stopped doing that directly now. So I design APIs in another tool called Stoplight.io,
Awesome.
Which is, again, sort of a similar sort of concept to Zuplo in that you've got a web interface to just sort of type things in as you want. You're not working in code, but you can jump across to the code if you want to. And that helps us get things right, get the right structure of API. So good practice there in terms of how requests should be structured, referencing models that can be used within different endpoints and that type of thing. Then I just export it from there as a JSON file or a YAML file, jump across to Zuplo, import, merges in, creates any new routes that are new that aren't yet in Zuplo working copy, click save, done, and we're away. So I'm really not touching routes themselves within Zuplo now. I just use Stoplight, and that's a really quick way to get things right, get it across, and have everything in sync.
So that's what a lot of folks think of as sort of API nirvana at this point. So congrats on that, where you're design first. A lot of people are struggling with actually making that their reality. So you're literally designing the API using OpenAPI over in this Stoplight.io tool, a great tool. Lots of our customers use it as well. And then able to merge that into Zuplo doesn't impact any of the work your engineering team has done. It just merges in seamlessly. And like you said, if a new route appears because you've just designed in the new super ticketing route, or sorry forgive my lack of familiarity with the depth of the domain, but and that will appear and the folks can start to add their policies and so on. So yeah, that's awesome.
Exactly.
And that's exactly why we did it. So
really
it was very rewarding to get the feedback you sent us about that workflow. Awesome. Well, Reece, it's been great chatting to you about this. I'm really grateful for you being a Zuplo customer and sending all the great feedback. And thanks very much for taking the time to share your story on Zuplo with other people. Really appreciate it.
No problem. And keep up the good work. It's a fantastic platform. Love using it. I actually come to work each day thinking, right, what am I going to do in Zuplo today? Which is a bit geeky, but there you go.
We love it. We love it. Thanks, Reece.